With me today is Luke Fenwick. After spending 25 years in the corporate world working in the sales and marketing space for brands such as Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy and Melbourne United Basketball Club, Luke has reevaluated his life, ditched the suits and become a life coach with the goal of impacting 1 million lives by 2020. Welcome, Luke, and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to having a chat and I appreciate the time. So here we go. Thank you.
So before we delve into, this life-changing decision that you've made, could you tell us a little bit about your life in the corporate world and how you got there?
Yeah, sure. How long have I got to talk about that part? I kind of say that facetiously. I'll quickly go all the way back to the start and then kind of, zoom a little bit closer to the present. So I was not much of a student, I must say. Did high school and then figured out really quickly that university wasn't for me. So after that, I slept in for a fair while and watched if anybody's in their 40s, as I am, might remember a TV show called Donahue that was on during daytime TV. So it was before Oprah and Sally, Jesse, Raphael and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I kind of watched that for a while and then mum said, get out of bed and go get a job. So I did. So I went and worked in retail. I worked at Myer for about 9 years. My first job was opening cardboard boxes and putting shoes on shelves out the back. But I eventually got into some other parts of it, planning and development, visual merchandising, management, etc. Left there and went to Jeans West, another retail brand, and worked there for 5 years. And then after that, I'd had enough of retail at that point in time and got a job for LVMH. So Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. If you enjoy champagne, you might have, drunk a glass of Moet and Chandon or Veuve Clicquot or Dom Perignon or something along those lines. So I did that for 7 years and it was an amazing experience. I got to travel the world and take customers back to France and visit the vineyards and enjoy, beautiful food everywhere, did some amazing events, would eat in Haddad restaurants, every second night of the week and met Roger Federer a few times. And I just kind of say that not to be anything other than life was fantastic. It was a really amazing opportunity to do really cool things. And at that point in time, I was 30, in my 30s, just beginning when I got, a senior role there. So I did that for about 7 years before making the move to Melbourne United Basketball Club. I met Larry Kesselman, who was the guy that founded Dodo many years ago and sold it for about $400 million. And he was, really, wealthy entrepreneur doing amazing things. And he just purchased the NBL in 2015. Which had not been in a good spot for many, many years. It had actually been, a bit of a disaster, to be quite honest. Hadn't been as run as well as it could have been. And he had a lot of ambition to bring the sport back. And I love the sport of basketball. I played as a junior and up until recently was still playing into my 40s, massive New York Knicks supporter, and had met him and said, look, I really want to be involved in bringing the sport back. So I went from a luxury goods business to, in essence, a startup business at Melbourne United. And for me, it was about passion and purpose, absolute passion for the sport. And, the purpose was, how do we bring the sport of basketball back to where it, could or should be? So, getting out of bed every morning was like, let's take this thing forward. Let's go. And you get to game day and you see the mums and the dads and, the kids and everybody having this, amazing time. And that really filled you with, I'll keep going. I'll do more and more. So I did that for a while and then, it was about 4 years and I couldn't really progress further within the business. And I thought, okay, I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. I was part of the administration when they won their first championship. So that was amazing, as you can appreciate, on court, celebrating, enjoying the time with the players and family and friends and all that stuff. So, career was about, tick this box, Louis Vuitton, great, travel, great. Basketball, work in the sport, great. Win the championship, great. So it was just tick, 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 which I think eventually led to some issues, which we might talk about later. But then I got to this opportunity where it was, okay, I'll go and work for this big advertising marketing agency, a global business. And that for me was about a bigger job, so a bigger opportunity to improve my career and improve myself. And it was also about a bigger paycheck. So if I got this paycheck, that'd be another ticker box, because it was a certain level, and then it was going to allow me to go and work on some property development. That was something I wanted to do at the time. But it ended up being, a real disaster, to be quite honest. It filled me with kind of, angst and anxiety, and, it was really ruining it wasn't ruining my life. I was allowing it to ruin my life and impact on who I was becoming in regards to the husband and father and the person I was. And I made the decision, after talking to my wife over a number of months, to really just walk away from it all and reflect on what I really wanted to do. And then that led into the life coaching space, which was something that I'd wanted to do for a good part of, 10 or 15 years, but just never really got around to. And that kind of leads me to sitting here having this conversation with you today as I, forge my own way as a coach after getting out of the corporate kind of gig.
So just to sort of delve into that just a tad further, do you think it was the role that you were in that led you feeling that level of angst and anxiety and unsettledness about it, or was it a boss? Like, what was it? The company? Like, what was it that was making you not be you?
It was an absolute cluster of all of these things that came together at that one point in time. I went into the role thinking that I would do what I'd done in every other role and organization that I'd done before: go in, work hard, achieve what I set out to achieve. So I went in thinking that that would happen. I went in thinking that people within the organization would embrace and welcome me and say, great to have you on board. And it was none of those things. So I didn't approach it from a real kind of novice. How do I, be a sponge and learn and absorb and ask questions? Like really dig into, well, I don't know about that, because I hadn't worked in that kind of marketing space, advertising space before. I'd done all this other stuff, but not within these kind of nuances. So, but I didn't want to ask those questions because I didn't want to look like I didn't know. So there was that, which was creating issues. There was the whole fear of failure, which everybody talks about, but I was so unfamiliar with failure. I was like, what is this kind of emotion? So there was creating that issue. There was the problems in regards to people within the organization, most part, really didn't want me there. They'd gone through some restructures and challenges, and a lot of the team that I was working with really we just never bonded. It just never worked. So there was a lot of pressure there. I just didn't really know where to turn to. My boss at the time, on reflection, obviously they're not here, so I can't talk about too much of it, but I don't know whether or not they really wanted to be there. There was an amazing individual in the organization, but I just didn't have enough contact with them. And it just all got to the point where I'm like, I was talking to my wife and saying, this is not one of those, I just need to push through. And we've all been through that before, where we're like, I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to push harder, and I'll eventually come out the other side and all will be okay. And we were talking about it, and I was going, this is not feeling like one of those moments where, because even in the other roles, I'd worked in massive global organizations. I worked for LVMH, biggest luxury brand business on the planet, shareholders, French company that had ambition. But, that for me, I was like, okay, I'll work through that. Whereas this other role, it just didn't feel like that. It wasn't going to be part of this long-term play. And it was like, no, I could see how much it was impacting me at home, and it was like, it's not worth it. Even if this was part of the long-term play, for it to create such carnage at the rest of my, life and house, was like, no, thank you. The paycheck's not worth it. It's just not, to lose my wife and relationships over those things was like, no, thanks. I'm out. So I left.
So advertising and media is quite a cutthroat industry. Do you think it might have been your first experience with people just really not being very nice to you?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. I kind of reflect back on that, before. I've had that, at Moet Hennessy. It was a really ambitious business. You would sometimes deal with, very, very large, powerful customers that made a point of not liking you to try and get a better deal because you're talking about, millions and millions of dollars worth of investment. So I had gone through that. I had, worked with someone like, Larry Kesselman, who's an amazing man, but he's an ambitious, very, very driven man, and all that was fine. So I don't think it was a cutthroat business. I think it was just this overall, all of these factors coming together. Yes, there was ambition in the business, but it was nothing that I hadn't faced before. it was possibly, me being a bit of a fish out of water, not wanting to ask the questions, the staff stuff I was talking about at the start, and it's just all compounded on each other, where it was to the point, it would have been for about 6 months. I would wake up every morning at 4 a.m. and my body was just like, it was just churning, thinking of what was going to go on over the course of that day. And I'd never experienced that level of, tension within my body before. I'd always put expectations on myself, and that had always created some form of, we need to do this, but not to the level of that. And then I'd get out of bed, to go up and get my little boy, who was, two-ish, under two at the time, to bring him downstairs and do the morning milk and all that jazz. And my legs would be like rubber trying to walk down the stairs. I'm like, no, this is just not healthy at all. Clearly not healthy. So it went from there.
Okay, so you spoke to your wife, you've made this decision that something's got to change.
Yes.
What were the conversations like? Like, what were the non-negotiables that you wanted to move forward?
With work or life in general?
Yeah, life in general, just what you wanted to do.
Yeah. So we actually, we're talking in regards to, I wanted to make sure I was around and I was present. And what I mean by that is that, when I'd get home at whatever particular time, I've missed whatever's happened during the day. You get home, it's maybe a little bit of, dinner time and then bed, and then it was the end of that. So that for me was creating a problem that I wanted to be around more and enjoy that. So that was part of it. I wanted to be able to be in a position where obviously it wasn't creating this massive issue with me and anxiety. So that was a non-negotiable. I wanted to be in an environment where, I didn't feel those things. And one of the things that I really started to reflect that I was missing in this place, and what I'd loved in all these other jobs, it was the people piece. I look back now and I have, 20, 25 years of people, working with people to try and get the best out of them, whether or not it's within a workspace, but also to say, well, what's happening in your world and how do I help, and all these kinds of things, which is part of the reason why I wanted to become a coach. But that was a non-negotiable for me. I wanted to be in an environment where I could help and make an impact on people and their lives and their careers. This was what was going on in my mind before I was like, okay, all in on being a coach. So those were questions that were happening. I wanted the ability to learn. Like, there was so much that were going into it, and I really wanted to find something, because I was looking at my boy and I was saying to myself, how do I make an impact on the world around myself and himself? So when I, get much, much older and towards the end of, my run, and he's, becoming, a man of whatever age, and how have I impacted the world around him to make it in a better place? And that was something I was really conscious of as well. And how do I be the best, dad and husband and person I could be? So all of these things were going on in my mind of what was going to come next. I needed to do and include all of these things. And at one stage or another, we were just looking of, going over to France and spending, a couple of months there, and, that didn't happen. And, all this other stuff eventuated as well. But there was a lot that went into it. And at the end of the day, it was also about making sure my relationship with my wife was in a good spot, because how I was not that. And she was upfront and honest and open with me, and we were talking honestly with each other in regards to, this is what it's doing to us. I didn't want to ignore that. Could have gone, I'll suck it up for a bit longer and I'll just push these emotions and feelings down further, see where that takes us. And then, what does that do to my marriage? I could have ignored all those things, but that was not my choice on what I wanted my impact to be in that household. So it went from there.
And so you landed on coaching. So what was it about coaching that drew you to it?
Yeah, so I went to a Tony Robbins, 4-day conference many, many years ago. So this was when I was at Moet Hennessy, and there's a gentleman there that owns a number of kind of bars and nightclubs and whatnot. And he owns the Melbourne Cup winner from maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And I knew that he'd come from a place where he didn't have a lot of money. So I said to him, well, how did all this kind of happen for you? How did you make your changes in life? And he said, I went to a Tony Robbins seminar. And I'm like, oh, that'd be pretty cool. I didn't know too much about Tony at the time. I knew a little bit, but not a lot. I said, oh, I'd love to see a Tony Robbins show. He said, well, I'm one of the people that brings him out to Australia now. He said, would you like a couple of tickets? I said, oh, I'd love a couple of tickets, thinking it was going to be 2 or 3 hours one afternoon in Melbourne where I could just easily arrange it. And he goes, okay, no worries, I'll organise a couple of tickets for you. So he sends me these tickets, and they're platinum tickets to the Tony Robbins event, which is not a cheap ticket. And it's in Sydney, and I live in Melbourne, and it's for 4 days. So it's nothing like what was in my mind. And so I was speaking to my wife, and she's like, yeah, like, what did you expect? So we arranged to go up to Sydney and stay there for 4 days and do this Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within. That's the one it was. And it was incredible. It was everything that you might have seen on social media or Netflix or whatnot, and walking on coals and through fire. And it was an incredible experience. And I was saying to myself, I'd love to do more of this. I enjoy presenting. I'd like to be able to present to not thousands of people, but a small kind of audience. And I'd really love to be able to sit down with people and say, how do I help? That's what I was enjoying in my corporate space. And I thought, how can I do more of that? But that got pushed on the back burner as life just continued to keep on rolling through until the point where I'd walked away from MKTG, and Julie, who's my wife, was like, well, what comes next? So then it was the coaching thing, and that's kind of where it started, to be quite honest. It was 10 years ago, the spark from that, not necessarily walking on the coals, but that's where it all kind of began in my mind. And it took many, many years to eventuate. And certainly, from that dark came the light of me choosing this path, and it went from there.
So obviously, the passion was ignited some time ago, but moving from corporate into coaching is a little bit of a common thing with some people out of the corporate world. Do you think that is because it's an easy space to move into, like an easy transition, because you have had the history of helping people and working with people and things like that? Do you think it's that, as opposed to other people may gravitate towards, starting a small business or, a craft business or something like that? Do you think there's a reason why corporate people gravitate toward coaching?
Look, it could be, if you come from a corporate space and you really enjoy that side of, helping people, then that could be one of it. I think often people come out of a corporate space and they are, whether or not you use the word burnt out or, coping with depression or anxiety or whatever it is, or just their own kind of challenges and demons, and they've seen what life can do to people, so that can be another factor of it. So I think there's all kinds of different reasons why people come out of that corporate space and then get into the coaching kind of gig. And a lot of it is that, because there is all kinds of different coaches. I think if you walked outside of your house now and down the street, you'd probably run into, 20 different versions of a life coach or a, wellness coach or whatever you'd like to call it. But at the end of the day, a lot of it is around how do people find structure and strategy. Certainly in my perspective, how do people find structure and strategy in their life that they don't traditionally have? And it is, really common. A lot of people just don't work that way in their personal life. So a lot of the things that I took away from the corporate gig, and certainly a lot of what I took away from at Melbourne United, working with elite athletes and seeing what these guys were like day in and day out, is now how I try to approach that from a coaching perspective too, because it is about the habits that you form. Like, you can't expect great things or even good things if you don't have the right kind of habits in your life. It just doesn't work that way, in my perspective.
So what made you settle on life coach? Like the coaching that you do, like why did you decide that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It just seemed to be something that it just was evolving each day. I spoke to a friend who is a life coach, and I'd known him for about, if I think back now, it'd be 27 or 28 years. So I met him when I was a junior playing basketball, and he used to pick me up because I didn't have a license and, take me to training and stuff like that. So I'd known him for a long period of time, and he's a life coach. He's been doing it for a number of years. So, we'd had some conversations, and then he put me in contact with another guy. I was speaking to him, and he just started doing the Jay Shetty course. So all of a sudden it was like, okay, I've got time on my hands. I'm going to do this course, and if worst case scenario, this course just delivers me better skills for life as a parent and a husband. You know, my little boy, and I now have a little girl, but at that point in time was like, okay, let's do that. Now let's throw myself into this because I just want to do something. And then I was just really getting into it and loving it and enjoying it. And the feedback was great. And then, you know, you need to do practice sessions and you're working with your, you know, the teacher overseas. And then all of a sudden I'm doing my board presentation to the J Shetty School. And at the time I was one of 2 people to unanimously pass the board, you know, part of this exam at the end. So that was really great. And then saying to my wife, well, let's create a website, you know, because that'd be kind of cool. And it just rolled on. And it was one of those that every time the door opened, I walked through it instead of going, oh, should I? I'm not sure. It was like, there's an option there. I'm walking through it and see where it takes me. And that kind of just kept on leading to one thing after another. And that's just how I've approached it. And I think early on in life, I haven't always done that. You know, the door open for things like Moet Hennessy and whatnot. But I think sometimes I didn't want to take some of these risks because I always had fear of not getting it right. You know, if I can't do it 100% right, you know, that ridiculous notion that people get in their minds, I'd often say no. And this just didn't feel like that time where I wanted to put all this stuff on it other than improving myself, being the best version I could be, and going from there. And I don't sit here today talking to you saying I'm the best version of myself by any stretch of the imagination. Like that's far from the truth. But this is just a really beautiful path that I'm on that I will continue to walk down, and I'll see where it takes me. And it's as simple as that. Maybe not simple, but that's kind of part of it.
So obviously this all happened during COVID, and a lot of people reassess their just life in general during COVID. It's been a huge time for reflection, I think, for the entire world. So do you think COVID played any part in you just bounding through those doors?
Yeah, possibly, because we were talking about going back to France. My wife's from France, her family's over there. So at one stage or another, it was, you know, leave this MKTG, which is the advertising agency I was talking about before. It was, let's leave there and we'll go to France and I'll, you know, reflect and figure out what was from there. And we couldn't go anywhere. You know, everything closed down. The world changed. It's still changing to this very, very moment. So then that just gave me the time. And that gave me the time and opportunity just to do that. And that's just how it evolved. A bit like I was saying before, it was just one of those things that each turn, it just led to one thing or another. Now, if COVID didn't happen, would I have gone straight back into another corporate role? I wouldn't have thought so. Not at that point in time. It wasn't. I was really clear in my mind that that's not what I wanted. It was to focus on, you know, myself, get right and go from there. So I don't think I would have gone into another corporate gig. And I certainly haven't looked at any of those things, you know, even when this was still, you know, flourishing or blooming at the start. It was like I didn't really want to do that. I looked at, you know, do I do non-for-profit stuff, or how do I get involved in, you know, animal welfare or whatever it might be. And at the moment, you know, I'm doing this and loving it. You know, I'm trying to do things like get involved with White Ribbon, you know, become an ambassador for them. That's something I really like to get involved with. And that's, again, just how I'm approaching it. But COVID certainly gave me the opportunity and the space to do this.
So talk me through starting a business during COVID, because you know, starting a business at any time is hard. Now you've come out of the corporate world and you're going to start your own business, another hard thing to do. And then you're doing it during COVID, where a lot of people are losing their jobs. And I suppose on a plus side, you know, people are evaluating and looking to that for help. But you can't get out and see people face to face. You're in Melbourne in Australia, which, you know, you guys down there had the biggest lockdown of all of Australia. And I think on a global perspective, we haven't really been affected too greatly, but Melbourne in Australia has been affected the most. So how did you make it work? Like, what did you do to get it up and running, and how did you build your client base?
Yeah. It's actually worked really well in regards to having this space. You know, 99% of the clients that I deal with are done over Zoom as opposed to actually in the flesh. And it seems to really work well for people. They like that it's nearly like, just that little bit of separation compared to sitting across from a table from someone. So it's worked really well. I've got clients and had clients from all over the world, like the UK, Ireland, Germany, the States, Singapore. So there's certainly been, a lot of people that have come from all over the place. And so how have I engaged with them was one of your other questions. So I do a little bit in social media, but that's not really where, much of my, opportunity comes from. It's more around engaging with people within the network that I have created over these last 25 years. A lot of people that I speak to and see what I'm doing on LinkedIn might reach out. Some of the people that I've engaged with in previous jobs that have their own businesses, I'll sit down and say, I did a lot for Are You OK Day last week, which ended up being an Are You OK week for me, where I was doing online presentations, talking to people about, how they could be approaching getting, better momentum during these kind of lockdowns. So it was just all of these things within my network. So when we first started doing it, and I say we in regards to, I'm always talking about my brand director, who happens to be my wife. She's a brand director for a financial services business, and she's been amazing to support. And I've also had some help doing video content as well as brand design and so on and so forth. So I've reached out into my universe to kind of bring it all together. So we created the website. My coaching side of things is called Dawn of Legacy. So my mother's middle name was Dawn. She passed away a few years ago. So it was a bit of a nod to mum in regards to Dawn, but it's also about, new beginning and the legacy in regards to the entire story that you're creating for your life. So that came to me at 6 a.m. one morning. I'd set up a gym in my garage and I was in there on the bike or something along those lines. And I just had this kind of light bulb moment, here we go, Dawn of Legacy. And then the business name kind of went from there. And, I don't say that flippantly, but all of these things they just keep rolling through because I'm open to it. I'm trying to not stuff it in a particular shoe box or in a corner. I'm just opening up. So COVID gave me the opportunity to have the time. It's certainly been a lot of challenges for people all over the planet and continues to be so. And I'm really grateful that the things that I had done up until that point in time gave me the opportunity to pause and reflect and then figure out what was going on, as opposed to some of the other pressures that people have unfortunately faced and continue to face. So that's kind of how I approached it. Brand, website, who do I look to engage with and go from there and talk to people. I'm always happy to talk to people and see where it takes us.
So a lot of the people that I speak to, they're very, I suppose that the common theme that comes out is mindfulness, positivity, and being present, I suppose, and really doing what you want to do in life. So are those the type of people that seek you out as a coach? Like what does your typical client look like?
Yeah, it's a real mixed bag in regards to men and women, and it's certainly about 50%, maybe a little bit more men at the moment, whereas at the start it was probably more women. The age group sits between maybe 30 through to 50, somewhere around those lines. And most people usually come to me because they are just finding something is missing within their life at the moment. And usually the people that I engage with are having trouble creating like habits, like they just can't get things to kind of line up. And they're the ones that I usually spend the most time with. So there's a behavioral scientist over in the States called BJ Fogg, and you may have heard of him before. And I really enjoy his work, and it's around simplicity of tiny, powerful habits, creating you what you wish to do. So I certainly talk to people about legacy as well. And when I talk about legacy, it's not that old piece that we make mention from a bygone era where it's, here's a house or here's some money or, whatnot. Like for me, legacy is your entire story. Everything that you do, it's places you go, people you meet, how you love, laugh, cry. It's all of these things that, people will talk about you. So clients come to me usually saying, I don't have great habits in my life. Something might be missing at the moment. I just don't, really feel that I'm living up to expectations that I have in my head. And certainly a lot of men talk to me about that. They'll say, like, family life's not what it could be. I'm not present like you just made mention before. I'm really struggling to find that routine to do all I want to be as a parent. So that's usually where it kind of starts. And then we kind of go from there.
So obviously, you've done training, you've gone through a certification process and everything like that. But how do you know that what you're saying to the clients is the right thing? Like, do you ever say something in a session with them and then on reflection go, oh, wow, I probably shouldn't have said that, or I wouldn't give myself that same advice? Like, how do you approach that?
My job's not to give anyone advice. Like, I'm not meant to be. I don't sit there and say to people, I'm going to be dropping truth bombs on you for the next hour worth of conversation. Like, that's not my role at all. As soon as I sit down with someone as a client, my first session with them goes for 2 hours. That's like a discovery session. And we really start to dig into, what's gone on in their life, where they are right now and where they want to get to. And I certainly start to really get into, like, who are you? Like, what are you about? Like, what matters most to you in life? And then what are you looking to create? And over time, I start to form with them something I call a headline statement. And what I mean by headline statement is, what are your aspirations that you wish to have in life? So you've told me a little bit about your backstory and who you are. Well, where are you looking to go to? And I don't mean a goal. This is not, I want to be a healthy person, or I want to run a marathon, or anything along those lines. This is aspirations for life. And once we really zero on that and understanding what those aspirations are, then we start to work on, okay, well, what are the habits that you need to form in order to get you to those aspirations? So it's really not about me giving someone advice on you should do this or you should do that. There is the process that we get through, and I certainly look at things like, how does BJ Fogg talk about creating, behavior and habits in life? So I share those kinds of things. I certainly enjoy sharing, a number of different podcasts that I might have experienced along the way for people just to listen to them, so they can hear different points of view from other experts, whether or not it's someone like BJ, or there's another gentleman from Stanford University called Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist. So I might share some of that stuff, or some just wonderful conversations from people that might be talking about relationships. There's one from a lady called Sheila Heen, I think her name is, and she just talks about how people engage with each other. So to answer your question, I'm trying to not really give advice. If someone wants to ask me, how would you do this, or what's going on in your life, and they want to have those conversations, absolutely. Like, I'm happy to share that. But at the end of the day, I'm always going back to, this is what we're here for. This is what you're trying. This is what your aspirations are. These are the things that when we've created the plan, like, they're creating that plan in essence. I'm providing exercises along the way, and it might be around reflection and journaling. Everybody at the very, very start, I get them to do this thing called Thrive, Survive, and Crash Dive over a couple of weeks. So I say to them, figure out the people, places, or things, the actions in your life that enable you to thrive. So you feel fantastic and full of energy, and this is really what life's about. What are the things that enable you to survive? So they are bread and butter to what your life is. And some people, for example, say that going to the gym every morning at 5 a.m. is survival for them. Great. So write that down. And then what are the things that are crash diving in your life that, maybe make you feel anxious, or, they take away from the thriving moments and surviving moments? So when we're having all of those things at the start, again, we're looking at this and then we're reflecting back on it to move forward. So it's another thing that I'm trying to not do is again, give them advice or give them these wonderful quotes that I've read in a book. Like, that's not what's about. It's their aspirations and vision, and how do I help them, uncover all of this other stuff that might be going on and where they want to get to.
So it sounds like you sort of peel back the layers to help people discover, where they want to go. And I think most people inherently want to do good things with their lives. They want to achieve great things. They want to leave a great legacy, and they want to live with purpose. But what happens when that is overrun by the desire, or not even the desire, the actual need to make money? Because everybody works to make money. There's very few people that I've ever met that work just for the love of it. So what would you do if you had a client that they know where they want to go? You've uncovered, the aspirations and the dreams and the big picture. How do you break it down to make it actually achievable when day-to-day life is in the way for most people all the time?
Yeah, like if you're looking at work for example, it's also looking and saying, well, what are some of these non-negotiables or boundaries that you want to place within your workspace? Because you're right, I would never sit down with someone and say, quit your job, go sit on a beach or become a life coach or whatever it is. And you also made mention at the start in regards to, positivity. And that's not necessarily what it is. I'm not sitting here saying, let's be positive all of the time, and just walk around with a smile on our face and ignore all of these other emotions. That's not what it is either. But it is about saying, yes, if money is something that you need to achieve, and as you said, we all need that to some kind of level. Well, in the workplace, what matters to you? What are those boundaries and non-negotiables? Like, what is the kind of culture that you're looking to work within? What is the space? Like, what are those really important things for you? And then it's kind of up to the person over time as well to say, is the life that I'm living now and the organization that I'm working in delivering the things that I'm aspiring to over time? And often when people start to say, now I have clarity in regards to where I really wish to go to over time, then sometimes that easiness starts to dissipate. And I've certainly got a client that I'm working with absolutely right now, and that is their mindset. They've gone through this period of, is this the right place? Is it the wrong place? Now all of a sudden going, okay, this is what it is, and this is how I make the best out of this situation. How do I flip that perspective? How do I be the best version of myself? And I think that's the real key for anyone, and where sometimes we miss out. If you can look at it and say, I'm in this situation now, and how do I get the best version of me in this spot to grow and to learn, et cetera, then sometimes you can get away from all of these other things that might be happening within a workplace. And that's what this particular person's doing. So they say, okay, how do I get the most in this part? And then looking over here, where do I want to get to further down the track? What does that look like? What are the values of the business? What's the particular field? Okay, I now have a handle on that. So who do I need to engage in within my network to help there? What kind of skills do I need to improve on? Like, how do I get to that point in time over time?
So coming from a sales and marketing background, you would have some very on-point experience with hard targets. You would know exactly the targets that you need to hit, and I suppose in that space, when you do hit them, because you've either met the revenue targets or the sales targets, or you haven't.
Or not.
How do you, exactly, you get a bonus or you don't. But how do you gauge your success in what you're doing now? Like, how do you measure your success?
Yeah, like it's a number of different things, and I've really tried to approach it from a business. And I speak to a lot of other coaches that maybe haven't, come from the same kind of background as myself, because they're always, okay, well, why are you doing this? And why does that make sense? And again, I don't sit here and say that I'm, perfect at any of this stuff. I'm still, developing it, but I still look at it and say, okay, well, this is the revenue that I need to achieve on a monthly basis. So what does that particular metric look like? I have a subscription database. So is that going in the right direction? Are people actually engaging with what's being sent out? I've also started a podcast with a guy over in Vancouver. It's called Two Dads, a coaching conversation about life, which is really nothing to do with being other than two dads, but it's not two dads talking. It is two dads. It's just us talking about life in general. So are people listening to those things? So I still always look at all of these particular metrics and say, are they heading in the right direction from the business side of things? But it's also as well, you're kind of listening to your customers. If you're not listening to your customers in whatever business you're in, that there's going to be an issue. So I always make sure at the very, very start of working with clients, I'm really clear in regards to what they are needing, what they are seeking from themselves, but absolutely always what they're needing from me. And that's a constant check-in that I'll have with them, certainly absolutely towards the end of it as well. And then, people give me reviews and whatnot. So that's a really important part, because, you need to be looking at these things. The numbers are great, but at the end of the day, why am I here? I'm here to, impact on lives, and I'm here to help people. And I was speaking to a guy last night. He's interstate, and he's been really quiet kind of guy. And he was talking last night about all of these changes that he's found in himself in regards to the importance of relationships and the importance of being honest and open and caring and loving. And when I first started working with him, like, these words were not coming out of his mouth. And I was sitting there last night, and it was awesome. Like, it was just awesome to see the changes in this guy talking about the things that really started to matter to him now. So there is the business side of things with all the numbers, but absolutely it's also listening to clients and seeing what's going on there. and are things heading in the right direction too?
So I did want to ask you as well, do you see coaching as an extension of, like, say, a friendship? And what would you say is the difference between, say, a mentorship, coaching, and having that super smart friend that you go to for advice?
Yeah, I think they are really different. When I think of a mentor, I think of a mentor in regards to if someone came to me and said, I want you to mentor me, then I think of that as being a mini version of me. So how does that person become that? I think a friend is absolutely around here as all of these particular kinds of conversations. And certainly my role as a coach is to have deep conversations, but it's also to have like a non-biased perspective. And I think that's probably the big difference with friends sometimes is they do have that biased perspective that can get a little bit cloudy or not call them out on their bullshit, if I'm allowed to say that. So I've just said it, so I apologize if I'm
You
not.
said
But
it.
that's part of my role as well. And at the very, very start, I say to people, how do we hold you accountable? Like, what are some of these characteristics? Are you someone that, because my job is not for them to push accountability onto me, because that's not what it is. It still needs to sit with them. But, I need to be able to say to them, well, you were going to do these things this week in order to, get closer to what you're seeking. You haven't done it. So I need to be able to call people on those things. And that's probably the biggest difference is absolutely their deep conversations. I'm not a therapist. I don't claim to be a therapist or anything. I haven't done those kinds of studies that they put themselves through. But a lot of the questions we really get into are these deeper thoughts and understanding. And, if they're really struggling now and carrying a lot of heavy weight, it's, well, let's go all the way back to the very, very start where before that weight came into your life and what did that look like? So we have a lot of those conversations. And I find a lot of the men that I deal with, going back to the men piece, is that they just don't have these conversations or rarely do, which is an absolute problem that men are facing right now. And because of those problems, then women are facing the problems because men are not dealing with these things, which is maybe another conversation for another day. But like that's the point of what you were saying before in regards to friendship. Like there's a line that I don't get into in regards to friendship. I'm not getting into all of those conversations, and it's very focused on themselves. So if there's things that are going on with other people in their lives, I don't get into too much of that because that other person's not here and I'm not working on that person to improve themselves. It's with the client, how do we get the best version of you, and how do you engage with these kind of situations? Like that's what my focus is.
Yeah, so it sort of sounds like you have to keep that business hat on somewhat so you don't get, I suppose, too personal with people when you are delving into the friendship aspect of it and getting involved in things that you probably shouldn't be.
Yeah, everything comes up, right? Like I'll hear if someone's had, relationship problems with their marriage, or this is what's going on with their kids. Like all of those kind of things come up, but it's information, if that makes kind of sense. This is important to me to have this information, all of the color of the picture that they're trying to create in their life. Like I need to know those things because often we're looking for what that trigger and the action and then the impact is in their life. And that is usually people, places, things that are going on around them. So I need to know those things in order to be able to dig in a little bit further to see, okay, well, this is a pattern in your life when you get in situations where you're not controlling a conversation and you feel that you aren't getting the outcome that you want, you react really poorly, like a 2-year-old. Like, why does that happen? And then you might go, okay, well, this started when you were very, very young. So all of those conversations come up, but it's the not emotionally connecting like I suppose some friends would, and then some friends then providing that feedback or their opinions or advice because they are emotionally connected. And going to what I was talking about before, my job is to not offer advice. It's to stick to what we're there for.
So just changing the topic for just a moment, tell me about your
Yeah.
podcast. What does Two Dads, a coaching conversation about life, what do you get into on your podcast?
Thank you for asking. So we're only just started. So we've done 5 episodes, filmed the 5th episode yesterday. Sean, he's over in Vancouver. And it originally started that we just wanted to have conversations about life. So we usually have a couple of quotes that we might have got from the greats. We talk about some content that we love, and we kind of pose a question to each other in regards to, if this happens with your child, then what do you do? So, we've had all kinds of different ones. A couple of episodes ago, we did a thing around greatness leaves clues, which was around habits in life. And yesterday we filmed an episode, and it was, what kind of man does the world need right now? And I started that episode talking about some of the statistics that are facing men with, suicide and depression, and then how those things are then translating in regards to, abuse to partners. So we were talking about that. And what prompted that is, I actually, rewatched a movie called Fight Club, which you might have seen, that was filmed in 1999. And I rewatched that the other day. And if you haven't seen it recently, you might have this vision of it's a bunch of guys punching each other in the face, which it is. But it's also because these men are not wanting to face the emotions and realities of what life is about. And one gentleman, who's the main character, just not wanting to fall in love. Like, he couldn't handle the emotions as this man, and wanted to do all this other stuff. And he was trying to fill his life with IKEA furniture and whatnot because he just couldn't face the world. So the podcast for us is about just conversations on life relating to particular topics, and, just really enjoying it and seeing where it takes us. It's just a good conversation, a beautiful conversation like the one that we're having today. It's not too much about coaching. We might have to tweak the name, given the name's a bit misleading, and talking about the kids stuff too. It's really kind of great hypothetical. My boy's nearly 3, his girl's roughly the same age. I've just had another girl, 7 days ago, and he's due in September. So we're always throwing these, what will happen when, your daughter's 15 or 16 and all this kind of stuff happens. So it's really amazing, and talking about, what are the kind of values that you're hoping that your children kind of grow up with, and how do you handle certain situations? But we love it. It's good fun more than anything else. It's just, that's the purpose of it.
So given that you are a father to a little boy and now a little girl, what would be the one piece of parenting that you would do differently for your children as opposed to what your parents did for you?
Oh my. I'm really mindful. I love that word. You mentioned it before, and I said to myself, I'm not going to use the word mindful, but I just did. I'm really conscious that I think at the end of the day, my parents did the best that they could. And I kind of look at my dad, and I go, that's not necessarily how I want to be in totality as a father. But at the end of the day, I think he did everything he could, or in his mind, in regards to what was important. Like, I never wanted for anything as a child. There was always, food on the table. We did great things. Like, I've been really lucky in life. So, I look at it and go, my parents did their best of whatever the situation was, and I can't knock them for that. My mum was really different in regards to, she was just a loving, caring, very strong, brave woman. She lost her mum when she was really, really young, and was raised by her sisters, and her dad went MIA at a very young age. So she wasn't really raised from that kind of, father, mother perspective. But she was an incredible woman, and she was giving and loving, and would do anything for friends, and certainly did anything for me as her son. And I think back to what would I do different, and I just don't know whether or not we had as many conversations as a family as we could have and should have, that really mattered and possibly shaped, or give me the opportunity to just hear from them and say, well, what's this about, and what would you do in this situation, and talk to me about like more value stuff. And I don't want it to be deep and meaningful conversations with every moment, because that's not what it's about. It's about kind of fun and love and laugh and things like that. But I do want to be able to share thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and talk about life stuff with my kids. And I certainly want to be able to do that with my boy, and make sure that he's growing up and able to share those thoughts, feelings, and emotions, because I think that's really, really important. I want to make sure my kids are growing up and having a really good balance of where they find their kind of, gratitude and self-worth, and how they are, enjoying the moments of learning and failing, because I didn't do that stuff. I thought failure was something really, really shocking, and you don't want to fail at anything. And I think that then, over time possibly slowed me down from doing things. Excuse me. And I don't want to do any of that stuff with my kids, and it's hard sometimes because you slip into some of these kind of thoughts on what, a perfect father should be. And that's not what it's about. Like, your kids don't need you to be perfect. They need to see some of these things along the way to realize that is absolutely part of life, that there is ups and downs, and there's emotion, there's sadness, and there's happiness, and there's joy and hurt. And that's all part of it, because if you don't have the other, then, well, how do you see what it is? So I know that's a very long
No, that's okay.
On the question that you're asking, but I think that all those things are really, really important, is just to be able to give and share and show them all of the things that life provides us.
Absolutely. And it sounds like the experiences that you've had throughout your life are really going to be able to help mold and shape the children that you've brought into this world, which is a fantastic thing. Luke, I've really appreciated chatting with you today, and I really do appreciate you answering, I suppose, the hard questions, and it not sort of being just the fluff on the top, but it actually talking about the deeper things that we have today. But one more question that I do have for you, just going a little bit deeper than we just did as well, is What would you do differently if only you knew?
What would I do differently if only I knew? I think I would have been a little less afraid. I think I would have been a little less afraid of some things along the way that maybe were just silly. I think of opportunities to do things or go to places or, experience stuff. I've been all over the planet, and I think sometimes, I wouldn't do things or venture out or go and, live a little bit more because I was afraid. And I wasn't afraid of physically something happening. I think I was just always, I don't want to do something else. So it was just a really kind of weird emotion if I reflect back to it. So, I kind of look at it and go, if I could do it over again and look at that, I think it's just probably to embrace some opportunity with a little bit more vigor and passion and purpose more than anything else. I think around that purpose, I think that's what I would have done a little bit differently to create a, bigger impact. And right now, when a door opens, I walk through it, and I reckon there's probably, 30% more doors that I didn't walk through in the past that maybe I should have, and seeing what that could have done. But I'm very fortunate. I've, had an amazing life, continue to have an amazing life up until this point, and we'll certainly keep going. But I think that's probably just part of it.
That's amazing, and I wish you all the best with going forward through those doors with gusto. So if you'd like to know more about Luke, I'll have links to his socials and his website on my website, ifonlyyouKnewpodcast.com.au. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you so much. Look after yourself.